Ladies and gentlemen, holy Toledo, what happened with the markets today? We see a major tumble followed by a major recovery, buying the dip. The S&P 500 index closes above 5,900 again. Wow. We're going to be talking about everything that happened in the market, some bullishness. For Palantir, we finally see a pop in its price action. We have a major announcement that helped what people are calling this gamma squeeze that we're seeing for Palantir. Back up near all-time highs. In a very volatile market, Palantir that was sitting here at the 120s for a while finally gets its pop-up. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. Of course, along with what's happening with the uncertainty in the market, why we're seeing these swings. 2025, ladies and gentlemen, is this roller coaster. If you can survive this volatility, you can survive anything with whatever Trump's going to say. We don't know what he's going to say. We had some big tweets today. We also had some stipulations coming from JP Morgan, things like that. Let's get into the news. Hit that like button, subscribe for daily videos, and pop it up on the screen. Palantir, like I said, at 131.78, back near these all-time highs. Now, in the market today, like I had mentioned, the S&P 500 index pops and tumbles down here to about 58.50, and then gets a recovery back up here, nearly a 70-point swing in one trading session, and Palantir is able to pop up about 7% here near these all-time highs. The point I make about this is if we see bullishness that begins into June, which is what a lot of investors are anticipating right now, we could see the S&P 500 index run up possibly to that 6,000 resistance point. More bullishness could be coming into Palantir, depending on the buying pressure. We could see a push past all-time highs, and that's where we see kind of that FOMO price discovery mode. Where's Palantir heading up next for its next leg? In terms of the news that we got today, we have Trump tapping Palantir to compile data on Americans, saying the Trump administration has expanded Palantir's work with the government, spreading the company's technology, which could easily merge data on Americans throughout various agencies. And you can see here, Palantir, Israel agree a strategic partnership for battle technology, and Palantir is really surging on this optimism, about AI darlings expanding work for the U.S. government. So you see the Foundry technology, sorry, it's been a long day, being integrated here with at least 4 different government agencies. The New York Times had reported this, a big article that the New York Times came with. And we see the Palantir here is really leading the NASDAQ 100 companies so far in 2025. The stock is up nearly 75% this year. So amid this optimism about the expanding work for the U.S., we see about an 8% jump. Palantir pulling back just slightly in the after hours, sitting at about 130. Palantir's gain has came from a lot of its work in the federal government. We also see officials at the Social Security Administration and the IRS have also had discussions with Palantir about buying its technology. So you're having the major departments and entities of the government that now want to work with Palantir. This is just bullishness that is continuing. We've seen Palantir that has continued to roll out contract after contract after contract, even with the big player Fannie Mae here, the government-sponsored mortgage backer, working to bring AI crime detection to help prevent mortgage fraud. And we saw this in the last video with that partnership, that it was taking these guys or women weeks to find out these mortgage fraud, things, and Palantir is able to do it in like 10 seconds. So the fact that Palantir is bringing a lot of utility for these AI solutions being offered to the government is very bullish for this stock. We also see right here on terms of a gamma squeeze, Palantir is just basically getting involved with everything. The way I like to compare it with, I can sit here and hit this with a dead hammer. We've been talking about Palantir for a long time. That I'm bullish on Palantir since we've been talking about it for the last 2 years. That look at nvda is the leader in terms of the hardware segment for AI infrastructure development, innovation, and even development of new technology, scaling AI in terms of the hardware perspective. Palantir is doing the same thing with the software side of things. They are the leading competitor, and we are seeing them continuing to rise and be very, very integrated with our own government. Now, pop it over here. Talking with the S&P 500, holy Toledo, closing out this 6% gain in May as we see investors continue to look past this trade policy confusion. The taco movement is starting to become a reality in terms of the taco trade. What we had today with Palantir and not the less with the general market here. We have, remember, the secretary coming out yesterday in Fox News saying that China trade talks are a bit stalled. And what this basically did was cause a little bit of uncertainty into the market. And then we have Trump coming out basically with a tweet starting the market, saying that in the social media post that China had violated its current trade agreement with the U.S. and a Bloomberg citing people familiar right here said the administration plans to broaden its restrictions onto the China's tech sector with sanctions. So China's tech sector, sanctions coming at them. You have them coming out saying, hey, China violated its current trade agreement and said no more even playing Mr. Nice Guy. So when you have these things that are starting to pop up across the board on top of the things that we have also from JP Morgan today, kind of instilling some fear in the bond market, lots of uncertainty that came into the market, causing the S&P 500 really to tumble. And what we saw, like I said, was this drop down here to about 58.50. One of the big things that we do see is the QQQ also had a major fall here, testing this 508 support level. Right here at this 508 support level, we saw a decent amount of actual support, buying the dip, and a regap back up, back to this 521 and closing right at 519. Now, there is support for the QQQ at about that 515, so we'll see what happens going into the market on Monday. But I can tell you right now, nobody knows, so I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. Remember, we also have the contentious plan for the international trade, the Court of International Trade, halting the majority of Trump's tariffs. And then the next day, we saw the appeals court granted on a stay. So nonetheless, the trade negotiations, I think, are back on the table. We saw optimism earlier in the month with Trump hopefully making some good moves with China. These are a bit stalled right now, though, what we're seeing. We see Trump is becoming angry. And also on top of that, we now have what's going to be happening just between the federal courts and Trump with saying, are these tariffs, can they impose them at all? One thing that did help the broader market stay up, basically we have inflation. The PCE data came in slightly lower than expectations. So, hey, at least that wasn't the third thing that piled up on top of us. But what we can see in terms of trading in the market is starting to fizzle out a lot of the uncertainty that we're seeing from these taco announcements. What you can see here is Trump has been making a lot of noise. The market initially has had some major reactions to that. But you can see the market right now is kind of starting to put it on the sidelines and maybe take it with a grain of salt. That's not necessarily horrible for people that are trying to swing options, trade different, on short-term trading. Even in the long term, the volatility and the uncertainty is absolutely crazy here for the year. It's not necessarily a bad thing that the market is finally starting to absorb, I think, a lot of this noise that's coming in. It might be just waiting to see what things are actually going to happen rather than the rumor, the spark, and the fear that's causing a lot of, uncertainty in the market. So I do like that. Kind of ignoring the noise here, sticking to the fundamentals. How's the economy doing? What we're seeing with buying pressure, a lot of buying the dip. We've seen a lot of any sell-offs that we've seen in the previous few weeks. Buying the dip has immediately happened. So these bounce backs are really good in terms of bullishness going into the summer, specifically with June. We could be expecting that possible next leg up here to that 6,000 point. If we don't, for some reason, anything could change at any moment. That's where you got to get back to that 59 level of support and even kind of the mid 5800s. That's what we'll be looking for the S&P 500 index. Other than that, some of the other stocks that we've been looking at, CoreWeave doing insanely well. We've seen, especially with their backing from nvda, CoreWeave has had a Great IPO. We see Nebius also working on cloud computing and AI infrastructure. Pulling back a little bit here today. It's not necessarily a bad thing. This thing's only at $36 right now when it was just originally at $40. There's a decent amount of support at that $40 zone. Robinhood sitting around here at these all-time highs at 66. And looking at some of the other things, Tempest, we see a decent amount of buy in the dip after, remember, we had that short report that caused a 17% drop here from the mid 60s down to the mid 50s. Tempest is kind of hanging out right here now, up about 1% on the day. So, somewhat I have for you guys. What do you guys make of all this? Peace out, take care, and I'll catch you guys later.